When your type 2 diabetes numbers aren't moving in the right direction, it can be a burden. But what if you could...
Welcome back to RT America. Well, Detroit police fired tear gas on high school students this week when a fight broke out after the school day was interrupted by a fake fire alarm. 12 students were arrested and several students reported sickness, such as asthma attacks, after the tear gas was unleashed on the kids. The incident is just one example of the use of so-called non-lethal weapons, also known as CCWs or crowd control weapons. CCWs are touted as safe and less deadly than methods like firing live ammunition into crowds, but a new study says they are not so safe after all. A report by the International Network of Civil Liberties Organizations and Physicians for Human Rights, which looked at the use of CCWs in countries like Egypt, the United States, as well as Israel and the occupied territories, found, quote, "The common understanding of CCWs is that they are non-lethal and preferable to the use of more injurious methods of dispersing a crowd. However, this report has shown that these weapons can often result in significant injuries, disability, and even death." And with CCWs being used to break up high school fights, what better time to understand them more? To help us do that, I'm joined now by Gideon Oliver. He's a lawyer who currently represents a group suing the NYPD for its use of so-called non-lethal weapons. Welcome to the program, Gideon. Can you begin by describing, first of all, this case you've brought against the NYPD?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks so much for having me. The lawsuit that we brought in the beginning of March, brought along with co-counsel Elena Cohen, we're both past presidents of the National Lawyers Guild New York City chapter, is on behalf of 5 protesters and journalists who were injured by the New York City Police Department's use of a long-range acoustic device on them in connection with a December 2015 protest in the wake of a Staten Island grand jury's refusal to indict an NYPD officer in the death of Eric Garner.
And can you talk about more about those LRAD weapons and what exactly they do to a crowd?
Certainly. So the police department here in New York has had LRADs, or long-range acoustic devices, since around 2004. In 2012, the December incident we're suing over was the first time that we're aware of that the LRAD was used in its deterrent tone, as they call it. The LRAD is basically a sound weapon that also has a function that is similar to a megaphone, but the non-megaphone or amplifier function is a weapons function. The manufacturer calls it a deterrent tone. It is designed to cause pain and injury in order to compel compliance.
And essentially get demonstrators to disperse, from what I understand. But Gideon, as more civil rights and humanitarian groups come out to publicly condemn the use of non-lethal weapons and also document how they actually can be very damaging, how do you see your case against the NYPD challenging their use of these against protesters?
Well, as far as I'm aware, there have only been a very few instances, documented instances, of LRADs being used in the United States against protesters. LRADs being used in the U.S., period, and they've all been in cases against protesters. One of them arose from the G20 in Pennsylvania and resulted in a $72,000 settlement and an agreement by the police department to develop use of force and crowd control policies and procedures that would require only responsible and measured use of the LRAD. There was another use of LRAD technology in Ferguson, Missouri, that also resulted in similar measures. The New York City Police Department, as far as we know, has no guidelines, training, or supervision of its LRAD use. So at a bare minimum, at a policy level, we hope to be able to force the police department to develop and implement those kinds of very basic use of force policies as applied to the LRAD.
And something else I just want to point out and get your take on is that we know that anyone in the range of the LRAD can be injured, no matter if you're a protester or even a journalist or someone who's come to watch a demonstration. Is the indiscriminate nature of this weapon part of the problem, as well as the types of trauma it results in?
Certainly, both are, I think, enormous problems. And it's not just bystanders or others who may not be deliberately targeted by the LRAD who can be injured by the LRAD. So can police officers who are operating it, or police officers who are in the periphery of it, who aren't wearing proper and appropriate sound gear. And so certainly the indiscriminate nature of the weapon is a problem, and the fact that it can cause serious and permanent damage in a very short period of time, depending on how it's operated. Those are two very large problems.
And of course, the LRAD is just one example of these CCWs. We can talk about tear gas, rubber bullets, and beanbags. But Gideon, I want to shift gears for a moment to talk about your former client, Joseph Jazz Hayden, who you represented after his arrest for filming police in 2011. He's been arrested again after being accused of police blocking the sidewalk while filming them while they were harassing a homeless man. How can independent media activists, or not even media or activists, people that see these types of cases and want to record them on video, film the police if officers are going to arrest them, especially videographers?
It's a very good question. I think one answer is carefully, given the New York City Police Department's track record of arresting bystanders, onlookers, and journalists. I was very proud to represent Jazz in the previous case, along with Sarah Kunstler and Rebecca Heinig. And I am not representing him in the current case. I represent the other person who was arrested along with him. But they were, by all accounts, engaged in observing and reacting to and documenting police interactions with members of the public in public spaces, which are good things and which are things that citizens should be doing and should be encouraged to do. The police department has a policy of allowing onlookers, bystanders, credentialed members of the press, and even independent media to observe, record, and bystand. That official policy is almost never followed in situations like the one that led to the arrests that you're talking about on this past Tuesday.
Civil rights defense attorney Gideon Oliver, thank you so much for speaking to all of those issues.
Thank you so much for having me.
He's acting like this. He's the posse here. Come on, man.
All right, guys, you're blocking the sidewalk.
You're blocking the sidewalk.
Nobody's blocking the sidewalk. Nobody's blocking the sidewalk. But nobody's blocking the sidewalk. There's plenty of room. There's plenty of...
You gotta back up.
Hold up. You're saying there's no room on the sidewalk. There's plenty of room on the sidewalk, bro. Let's not make this a sidewalk, bro.
Point of no return. ID. Shoot us.
Now you're in the way of us doing our police work.
No, we're not stopping you from doing police work. All right. Yes, I am, because you're illegal. Right, but you're unlawfully. Now you're. Now you're grabbing it. ID. You're trumping the sidewalk. I think you're gonna get arrested.
I'm saying that.
You're under arrest. You're under arrest. My gun. What? Get back. Nobody's next to your gun. Nobody's next to your gun. Nobody's next to your gun. Give me your ID. You're gonna get arrested. Whoa. Give me your ID. You're gonna get arrested. Get back.
Yo.
Out of my face.
You are the problem. You are the problem. You are the problem.
Give me your ID. Don't look me.
Hold on.
Don't do that.
Yo, bro. What's the problem? What's the problem?
Put your hands behind the back. Okay. Put your hands behind the back.
What's going on? Listen, they're all my older bro. What is he doing? What is he doing? Listen, what is he doing? Stop him! Somebody stop him! What is he doing? Why is he roughing him up for? Why is he roughing him up? Why is he roughing him up? What is he doing? What is he doing? What is he doing? It's too much. This is not excessive. Nobody can see the way he's doing excessive. That's excessive. That is excessive.
You hear what it takes? I will hit you with crazy.
You're going to be looking for a job in the morning. You're going to be looking for a job in the morning.
You're under arrest right now. You're under arrest.
Arrest for what?
You're under arrest. For what? And under arrest to give me your hand.
You ain't mishandling me like this.
That's me too. Listen, you can't take it like
Stop! You see what he's doing? You see what he's doing?
Look at what he's doing.